Marcus Jenkins here on behalf of After School HQ. Excited to connect with you all. And as I mentioned, we have a great one. This is one of our returning guests who is very tenured in this space, who knows exactly what to do. So excited for him to rock out. But just giving you some insight as we are After School HQ, we are a CRM database company based out of Indiana. And essentially, our goal is to help youth providers across the US be able to engage with students and parents, provide a centralized tool for their team, and make it easy to report on their impact. But we love to bring on guests outside of our space to provide some additional context and content on how to help enhance the work you all are already doing day in and day out. So today we have Mr. Grant Fulton. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and I'll kick it over to my guy, Grant.
I appreciate you, Marcus. My name is Grant Fulton, and aptly named, my parents knew what they were doing when I was a kid, named me Grant, because we're going to be talking all about grants today and how those grants can potentially impact your organizations, regardless of where you are, and what type of organization you run. I mean, if you're running youth organizations, we want to find some grant funds for you. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here, and we're going to take a look at this. I am going to be talking through a lot of different information here today. But if you think of something along the way, please put that in the chat, because Marcus or Anna or one of their team members from AHQ, they will jump in and interrupt me. I've asked them to do that and say, hey, if someone has a question, throw it in the chat. That way, if I don't see it while I'm speaking, we can stop, we can address that, because I'd rather answer your questions rather than have you have a question and I just talk right through it. So feel free to jump in there. So first of all, let me introduce myself here a little bit. I am Grant Fulton. I do a few different things here. So I co-founded Solutions for Youth Services, which is a firm based on capacity building and evaluation specifically for youth serving organizations. So we do a lot of program evals, we do a lot of grant evals, a lot of grant support. I also work for Coastal Carolina University as a professor in their MBA program, Go Shots. And I redesigned a course recently for Coastal Carolina that is specifically grant writing for nonprofit organizations. So I teach that at the university level too. And then I also have some independent training that I offer online through thegrantdoctor.com. So I come from a youth service background. I started as a teacher, worked my way up through administration, both as an athletic director, as a principal, and then also working as a school district grants administrator. So I love the youth space. It's not just something where I learned how to write grants and I'm trying to transition. I've lived and breathed being on the front lines as a teacher, as an OST provider, as well as working with some of the grants at the district level. So before we jump too far into specifics on how we can prepare to win grants, I kind of want to touch base on what really is the wonderful world of grants. And I say that a little bit tongue in cheek, because I know, as well as you probably do if you've worked with grants in the past, that it's sometimes anything but wonderful. And there's a lot of things that go on behind the scenes with grants that can make it very, very difficult to not just maintain the funding, but also maintain your sanity. So I always like to make sure everyone's on the same page when we're talking about this, that grants are not free money. I do a lot of contract work writing grants for folks, and a lot of times people will call me up and they'll say, hey, Grant, can you go get us some grant money? I said, yeah, I'd love to. What type of project do you have in mind? They're like, oh, we don't know. We just need to fund our organization. Our operations fund is depleted right now. Can you find us some money? It doesn't quite work like that. There's not just a grant tree out there somewhere just providing all sorts of funds. Oftentimes, the funders are going to be providing or requiring some type of matching requirement. So if you won a $250,000 grant, they may require that you put up at least 20%. So you're having to come up with 50 grand only to be eligible for it. So you always have to keep that in mind, that this is not a free money opportunity. The more money you need or the more money you're requesting, oftentimes it's going to come with additional requirements on the back end. So if I want to go out and get a $1.5 million grant, there's going to be a lot more reporting requirements on 1.5 mil than there would be on 15,000. And that does vary a little bit by funder, but the larger the amount, the more expectation that funder is going to have, because at the end of the day, they want their stakeholders to know the good that they're doing as a funder, not only what you're doing as a program provider. So this does take quite a bit of work when you're looking at this grant mentality and figuring out ways to win those grants for your organization. But at the end of the day, if you can go ahead and bite the bullet on some of these things and really work through the difficulties of grants, is going to be very rewarding in the end. So grants are a very calculated risk. Even if it's not going to require you to come up with a check and you're going to have to write the check right out of the gate, there's extensive time requirements. So you're going to have to put up some time to invest, either you or your staff members. So that human capital is an expense. Even though those people may be already on your payroll, those people may be working and they're salaried employees, so it doesn't feel like you're spending money. That is now money that could have been spent somewhere else, or that time could have been spent somewhere else doing something else, but instead it's going to be on a grant. So these are very calculated risks. We have to make sure that we have a good chance of winning that grant before we start jumping in and spending all that time. And it's always important because I talk with a lot of folks, and a lot of times they'll get very discouraged. They say, oh, I've applied for 5 grants, 10 grants. I haven't got any of them. You know, what can we do? I'm tired of grants. I'm just going to figure out how to fundraise outside of the grant world. And I get it, because as terrible as it sometimes sounds, I mean, even the best grant writers, professional grant writers, they do it for a living. They're not going to be hitting 100%. You know, it's going to have some times where even the best grant writers don't win the grant. So what do you do? How do you encourage your staff? Because that's a difficult way to spend your time and get really not a whole lot to show for it. So when we're talking about grant writing is all of these things. It's not free money. Grant writing is a calculated risk, but grant writing is not going to be just technical writing. You know, we talk about grant writing and, oh, we have to write this proposal, we have to write this application, but it's a lot more than just writing. There's more to it than that. There's a lot of project management to it. It is not a one-person job. And I have a lot of people who have contacted me over the years who said, hey, can you write this for me? I was like, yeah, let's get your grant writing team together. And they said, oh, we don't have one of those. I said, well, let's create one. And they said, well, we don't even know where to start. But having this group, this team mentality and mindset, and this group approach to it is going to be greatly beneficial to your organization. It's going to significantly increase your chances of winning, increase your engagement from your stakeholders, from your funders, from your donors, and it's really going to make it a lot easier to be successful in the long run. Grant writing is not going to be a replacement to fundraising. So if you're running all these dinners, you're running golf events, you're running charity balls or auctions, whatever that is, grants are not a replacement to that. Grants are going to supplement. When you're looking at the federal government and looking at some of those type of grants, the phrase that you always hear is supplement, not supplant. And that even goes for private foundations, not just governmental grants. You're looking to supplement your programming, not to replace funding that is currently in existence. And the last thing that I need to make sure you know is that grant writing, while I may make it sound a little bit daunting at times, it's not an insurmountable task. So we're going to be talking through some different ways to be successful in pursuing grants and keeping grants. So this is just kind of an overview of what the wonderful world of grants may be for you and your organization. So as we look at the grant process, this is a super boiled down, condensed version of what the summary of the grant process looks like. And I really break it down into about 5 stages where you're looking at how do you find and identify grants? How do you apply for grants? How do you implement grants? And then at the end, you have to evaluate grants. So there's a lot more than just finding an application, writing it down one time, writing that proposal one time, telling about the wonderful things that you're going to be doing with the funds that you're going to be receiving from that funder. And you're really having to look at it as more of a holistic approach to implementing a program or completing a project. Because it's not a one-time application. I get $500,000, wash my hands and move on. We just got money, no strings attached. A lot more to it. So I want to first take a look, now that we have kind of an understanding or a mutual understanding of what grants are and are not, here are 10 rules for success. And any organization I've worked with over the years writing grants, working with this, I've followed these same 10 rules for success. I preach these 10 rules. These are really going to be valuable as you're looking for how to start your organization in winning grant opportunities. So the first one, we have to be organized. And that may seem like a no-brainer, but there's going to be extensive documentation required. So as you're preparing your organization, think ahead of time how you can be prepared. A lot of times grant funders are going to want to see job descriptions. They're going to want to see resumes. If your organization is not ready with your resumes, you may want to update those even before the opportunity arises. You need to make sure that all of those ducks are in a row, all of your financials, you have that condensed down into an easy uploadable file. And it seems like a lot of people are going to think that, okay, well, we have all of our stuff, but it's sometimes difficult because you might have some information that you legally are not allowed to share. It may be protected for one reason or another. The other thing that you might have to think about is, when am I going to be writing this grant? How can I organize my staff schedule? If I know I'm going to be serving youth over the summer and the 2 weeks leading up to it are the busiest time of year, we have to make sure we're coordinating that project team, because all these small details are going to matter in the end. And we're going to have to make sure that every single one of these I's are dotted, T's are crossed to make sure we can win these funds from the different funders. Rule number 2, start your proposal now. And you may be in this webinar hoping that, I'm going to come up and give you a list of exactly what grants you need to apply for and all of this. And we might not have a grant specifically for your organization in your state today, but you can start your proposal now. What project do you know that you want to fund? What program is it that you're going to be able to expand? Maybe you want to add some more counseling, or you may want to add some more social workers and integrate those into your program to help with that mental well-being, the social emotional learning component of youth work. Start those relationships now. Start that proposal now. Figure out what might come up. Maybe it's one of those scheduling things I mentioned. But now is the time to start your proposal. So regardless of whether or not you have something already on the horizon, start organizing your documents now. Start putting together a project plan, a program together that you want to fund. Maybe your board wants to fund. Maybe some of your parents of your students want to fund, so that you can start and hit the ground running once that application becomes available. Going right along with that, we've got to build relationships with funders. That could be local government, state government, federal government, private foundations, corporate foundations, regardless of who it is. If you have heard of an organization that gives out money as grants, figure out how to build those relationships. There are often times that funders, especially with some of the private foundations, they don't even have applications. So if they know that you're an organization that has data to back that you are a successful program serving students, and they know that you have the ability to expand and to scale into a large organization, they might be willing to give you some of those funds right now, no questions asked, no applications. The other thing is, if there's those private foundations and those funders, maybe their grant application window has already closed. But if you're looking in my home state of Indiana, the Lilly Foundation is one of the biggest funders, and they often are giving out funds even when there's not an application, simply because they've built relationships with organizations, and vice versa. The organizations have built relationship with the funder. It kind of gives you an inside scoop on what they might be looking for. They may tip you off as to what you need for this upcoming application. So build those relationships now. Research that funder. Stalk them a little bit. Figure out, what have they done in the past? Do they gear more towards rural versus urban, or vice versa? Do they have preference on racial demographics? Do they limit it to only only religious organizations, or do they exclude religious organizations? Figure out what this funder is really looking for, because each funder is going to have their own priorities. Figure out who is going to be those key decision makers, because in each organization, maybe it's a director of development, maybe it's a director of community engagement, but they've got someone who is going to be doing a lot of the deciding. They're going to be doing a lot of the decision making when it comes time to submit those proposals. And you want to make sure that the person who's going to be making those decisions knows your name, knows your organization's name, and knows the wonderful things that your organization is doing. So that way you have a little bit of a leg up on the competition. Number 5 here, demonstrate your expertise in the field. So if you know you're going to expand your social emotional learning, make sure that everything you're doing right now is aligned with current research. Or maybe you're running a youth sports organization. And I've worked with a few of these in the past as well, where they have a youth sports organization. They're really working on character development, leadership, and social emotional learning through sports. How do you make sure that what you're doing as a sports organization is going to align with the best practices? Extend beyond just the fact that you're a safe environment. Everyone who's providing youth programming strives to be a safe environment. How do you take it a step further? How do you show that you're on the cutting edge of all the research? How do you impress those organizations and those funders by aligning everything you're doing to research? And chances are you're already doing those things. So what's going to be the next step is making sure that you have the data to back it, find that research, find maybe some national after school organizations who are going to be able to say, yes, what they are doing is what we have found to have the best results for kids. Because at the end of the day, if they're funding something that's going to impact youth, they want to see that you are already doing that and can continue to do that later on. As you're proposing these new programs, these new projects, partnerships are going to be key. I've yet to see a successful grant application that didn't have some type of partnership included. Maybe you're having another organization come in to provide training. Maybe, and I keep going back to this example, but maybe you want to embed some social emotional learning and counseling, and you have a partnership with a mental health provider who's going to come into your program. Figure out ways that you're going to be able to integrate and show those partnerships, because not only is that going to show that you have the community support, but when that grant finally runs out, maybe it's 1 year, maybe it's 5 years, but they want to know that you're going to be able to sustain that program. And by having more organizations in support of that program, of that project, you're going to be able to demonstrate sustainability. And I know a lot of times we talk about the word sustainability and it feels like a fictitious word, because if we had the money, we wouldn't need the grant. If we had the ability to sustain it right now, we wouldn't need the grant. But there are still some things we need to put in there to show that we are thinking about what this is going to look like 5 or 10 years down the road, and partnerships are a perfect way to demonstrate that. We've got to make sure that everything we're doing is extraordinarily detailed. We want that reader to leave having read your application and your proposal with 0 questions. How are they going to staff it? Oh, I see that right here on page 5. How are they going to provide a snack to their program in the after school world? Oh, we see that here on page 10. How are they going to address it if there's an event that takes over their building? Maybe you're in a school setting and you're a nonprofit going into a school, and you know that the Christmas music program is right around the corner, and you're going to get displaced because come December, there's all the elementary Christmas programs coming in. So what are we going to do? How do we anticipate these barriers while still providing that high quality programming that you're writing about in that grant proposal? Anticipate and explain those barriers is going to have those detailed plans let funders know not only are you equipped to handle additional funds and scalability, but you're also aware of what that is and how you can integrate all these other school and youth programs into your program and work hand in hand. Number 8, and this is a term that I've coined here that a lot of people get a kick out of here, is it's that application chameleon. We don't want to adjust who we are and what we do just because an organization or a funding organization wants to throw money at a cause. If you are not focused on serving rural communities, but you see $1 million grant opportunity, don't just go run out and find a rural partner just so you can try and get $1 million. That's not who you are. And vice versa. Figure out who you are as an organization. Stay true to that mission. Not every grant opportunity is the right opportunity. So don't change what you do just to be able to appeal to a funder to be able to fill out an application. Propose what you can sustain. And what you can sustain is what you're already doing, or what you're working towards doing. So make sure you're staying true to that mission at all times. Next, pay attention to that budget. Here's the nice thing about grants is that funders are willingly giving over money to fund projects. Most of the time they have some sort of idea of what it takes to be successful. So yeah, they know it's going to cost some money. They know that busing is expensive if you have to bus kids somewhere. They get that. So they're not going to balk when they see a high ticket item, as long as you can show how it's going to be spent. Now, if I say, okay, my name's Grant, I'm the director of this program, and I need a new golf cart so I can get around the campus of the YMCA, now I'm being a little bit greedy. But as long as we're maintaining that open line of communication, we say we have to bus kids because we have kids who live 20 minutes away and they have to have safe transportation after dark because they live in a dangerous neighborhood. That's not being greedy. That's being practical. That's using those funds appropriately. And then last in our 10 rules to being successful with grants, maintain your professionalism at all times. So that language in your proposal, we're not using slang. The other thing is, while you are well-versed in your field, funders are mostly versed in that field. So when we start using phrases like OST, they might not know what out of school time is. So when you're saying OST, or you're talking about students who have special needs and you refer to them as students with an IEP, they might not know what an IEP is. So maintain that professionalism, not just in your acronyms, but also in avoiding simple things like my program and I'm going to do this. Really focus on your organization. And then after that award is announced, regardless of whether you get it, maintain that communication. Because even if you might not win now, if they release that same opportunity in a year, you're going to already have some insider info, inside scoop, because you're going to receive feedback once you receive that. So these 10 rules here, these 10 rules for grant success are always the ones that I stress anytime I'm working with an organization, working with new grantees, existing grantees, those who are new to the world, or maybe they're just dipping their toes in the water at this point. So I've talked a little bit about what it means to write grants and how it's not really writing grants. Really, grants are a lot more than just putting together a proposal. So I always pose the question, are we going to be focused more as being a grant writer, or do we really want to be focused as a project manager? And from what I've already said, you kind of know what my inclination is that we really want to be more of a project manager. Because if I'm just a writer and I have this fancy writing, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a good proposal. I can use fancy words, I can include research, but if I don't have a clear-cut plan on how I'm going to impact youth, on how their standardized test scores are going to improve, on how the recidivism rate isn't going to be improved, how we're going to make sure that all of our kids have improved social emotional well-being. If I don't have that proposal, if I don't have that program, it doesn't matter how fancy of writing I have. We've got to have that strong project. And that's really why I stress that if you're preparing your organization, the proposal is so much more about the project than it is about your writing. So just because you are writing a grant for your organization, it does not mean that you have to be the strongest writer. Develop that team, develop that mindset. I don't know if I have any retro gamers in here, but we're going to talk about some writing pitfalls now. And that is a little bit of a throwback to the 1982 video game Pitfall by Activision on the Atari. So some writing pitfalls: don't make your writing fluffy. And I put that in quotes. When you're writing with a lot of fluff, readers are going to see right through that. They read hundreds of grants. They know a good program from a bad program. They know what fluffy writing is, where you're just filling in the gaps by using big words, the $10 words, as I call them. You don't need to use $10 words. You don't need fluffy writing. You need hard, actionable steps to impacting youth and impacting your program, your community. So we don't want to cover up the insufficiency in our programming with that flowery language. The program is so much more important than the way the program is written into that proposal. And a lot of times I've seen this because I've served as a grant reader for some organizations where I've been helping to analyze which organizations should be funded. And it's very transparent that people will try to cover up, I don't have a good answer for this question in the request for proposal. My organization is not quite ready for this. And so they try and cover it up by saying things that are fancy or saying things that make you feel good. But it's really easy to see through that as a grant reader and really figure out, is this organization prepared to win these funds and implement this project or not? So as this project manager, here's some of the tasks that you're going to be responsible for doing. None of these, as you can see, have anything to do with writing. This is all getting the information together to be successful with your grant. So as a grant writer, and I've been contracted by several organizations to, quote, write their grants. It does take a lot of time to put pen to paper or really fingers to keys and type out this grant proposal. But that's very easy to do once you have all of your ducks in a row. Once you have the program outlines, the partnerships, the MOUs, the budget, all of these things are lined up and ready to go. The writing becomes super easy. And you don't really have to be a technical writer. You're just putting on paper what you and your team have already communicated in some of your meetings, what you and your partnerships have already discussed and put into an MOU. And it makes it real simple to write a grant because even though it could be 20, 30, maybe even 100 pages for that proposal, if you have everything you need and the program is lined out perfectly, it's going to be super easy, super quick and efficient to write those proposals. So as your grant project manager, I've talked about this team approach to grant writing and this team mentality. So let's take a look here. This is what it looks like to have a grant writing team. You are still the grant project manager. You're still leading that team, but you want to have about 3 to 6 people because you're going to get some diverse perspectives. Maybe you want to include your CFO. Maybe you want to include some of your key stakeholders or maybe a board member. Maybe you have a program director who's going to be implementing the program. If you have fewer than 3, you probably don't have enough perspectives. If you have more than 6, you're probably going to have too many people trying to stir the pot or put their hands in the pot and guide the direction that they think is best. So really 3 to 6 is ideal. And that way you can have specific tasks assigned to each of those people, and you can really work together collaboratively to come up with all of this list that I just mentioned here, all of this list of documents, all of these things that you have to do as a grant manager. Having that team of 3 to 6 is really going to help you not just prepare a strong proposal, but win those funds and be prepared to implement those after you've been awarded.
Hey, Grant, quick question.
So as you are,
We
yeah,
do
go
have a
ahead,
quick
Marcus.
question in the chat. So Miss Floyd asks, do you know where to go get grant writing training? Can you speak to that for us?
There are a lot of different opportunities on where you can get trained on how to write grants. Um, Not trying to plug myself. I do have one through thegrantdoctor.com. And I mentioned that earlier, but also philanthropy.com is a great one. Um, so I offer a course. Philanthropy.com offers several webinars, several courses. There's some local universities. Like I said, I teach for Coastal Carolina in their MBA program, and I created a course for them all about grant writing. I know in my home state of Indiana that Indiana University has some training as well. So, but those would be what I would refer to are universities or philanthropy.com as some of the leaders in that field. You said there's another question, Marcus?
Nope, that was it.
Perfect. So as we're looking at this team approach, the reason we want to do this team approach, we want to spread those responsibilities out, but it also is going to increase the engagement. So if you're going to have a new program or expand a program, sometimes people will get hesitant. Some of your donors are going to wonder where that funding or sustainability is going to come from. But this is going to increase that engagement because not only have you incorporated diverse perspectives, but you now have spokespeople. And so you've got a lot of spokespeople who are part of it and have ownership of that project. So you're going to have these expertise of your team members, and you're going to have these spokespeople who are going to help cheerlead for this new project, this new program. So some different people that you might want to include, and this isn't an end-all be-all list, and I mentioned this a little bit, but including some of these people are going to provide that diverse perspective. And I'm talking about diverse, I'm talking professionally diverse. It doesn't necessarily have to be that, each one of these people comes from a different neighborhood or a different state or country. It could just be all people who are already working with you, but they each have a very unique perspective based on their job function. And so putting together a team of people from this list or something similar to this list will give you an idea of how you can have those diverse perspectives to be successful when it's coming time to implement that new program, that new project. So we mentioned this a little bit, but as you're looking at your team considerations, no more than 6 folks. That's what you want to target as your top end. And so it's going to allow you to really kind of highlight, kind of highlight some of those proposal submissions, as you're going to be able to make sure that those roles are clearly identified with those team considerations, because you do have up to 6 individuals. One of the things you have to do as a project manager is ensure the unity, and then you are going to be working as the lead on that team. So maybe you're not the executive director, the CEO, but in this particular team, if your executive director or CEO is in that room, in that team, you are still in charge. And so you have to work with your team members to recognize that within this team, some of those roles are clearly defined, and then you take over and create those internal deadlines. Now, this next slide sometimes can be a little bit off-putting to people because I'm talking about how long it actually takes. And this is having worked with organizations who are under $1 million in annual revenue, working with organizations that are over $25 million in annual revenue, working with organizations, everything in between. And so it does take time. So these are just kind of general ballpark ranges of what it's going to take for you and your team to be successful. So LOI, that acronym stands for a letter of interest or a letter of intent. And there's some very small differences between those, but it's just informing that funder that you are going to apply or that you are interested in applying. Which you'd think a 1 to 2 page letter might not be so long as 6 to 8 hours. But a lot of times, even in that 1 to 2 page letter, you have to have everything already prepared, all your projects, all your ducks in a row to make sure that you are ready to communicate that with that funder. Now, a federal grant, I know as youth program providers, one of the big ones federally is that 21st CCLC grant. If you're not familiar with 21st CCLC, that's a good one to look up. It's available both to nonprofit organizations, community organizations, schools, but it has about $1.2, $1.3 billion funded federally. But like I said earlier, the bigger the amount of money, the more regulations and requirements are going to be tacked on to winning and maintaining those funds. So when you're talking about an 85 plus page grant, over 100 hours is not really out of the realm of possibility when you're looking at something like that. Marcus, do I have any other questions here before I move on?
So I'm not seeing any. Nope. So we're good to go, brother.
Perfect. So we've talked a little bit about, or I've talked about how it's important to be able to communicate with funders, the success of your program. So I want to hit on metrics and evaluation. And this is not something that AHQ asked me to do, although AHQ is a good platform to help with this. If you don't have a good system of, collecting and evaluating your data. But metrics and evaluation is going to be really how you're going to communicate to funders now and funders in the future of what your success is. So you need to have both of these things. You need to have goals and you need to have objectives. And oftentimes these are used interchangeably, but this is what I'm speaking of when I'm talking about grant goals, grant objectives. Your goals are kind of that pie in the sky. What do I want to accomplish? Your objectives are going to be more specific metrics. So that SMART format, if you're not familiar with SMART format, you can Google that. There's a ton of resources on it, but it's specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time sensitive. So if you're really focused on that SMART format, and I'll show some examples of this here momentarily, but this is really what it's going to take to show not only that you are prepared to evaluate the success in your proposal, but once you have won those funds, by having these goals and objectives, you're going to be able to measure the success versus what you've proposed your success will look like. So an example might be this, that your goal is for elementary students from economically disadvantaged neighborhoods to perform at or above grade level in reading. How do we define that? We define that through those objectives. So when you're looking at these goals, you're looking at these objectives, you really want to kind of focus on at least 3 objectives per goal. So these are some very concrete ways of saying, my program is going to be the best way for these kids to find success if you give me this $500,000, $2.5 million, maybe it's $10,000. Finding out the ways to say, not only do I think that we are going to be the best because we're going to implement these practices, but here's how we're going to demonstrate that we are actually achieving what we set out to achieve. You need to have a comprehensive evaluation plan. And so your evaluation plan is going to be integrated and woven into your program plan. So your dosage of the activities, which is your frequency, how often are you going to do this? You know that you're going to have kids coming 5 days a week. how many days during that week do you really need them there to achieve the goals? If they come for 1 hour a week, will they achieve what you set out in your evaluation plan and your metrics? Or do we really need them to come more like 3 to 4 days per week to achieve those? Connect the activities that you're writing in your proposal to your outcomes. You're predicting what is going to come of this. So as you're evaluating yourself, you write a great proposal, you have a great new project, a great new program, you're connecting it to these outcomes to say, not only are my operations in order, but this is how I'm going to prove to you that my operations being in order will result in student outcome and student achievement. So who are you going to have create this? Because a lot of times, it's difficult to write these objectives and goals, and sometimes you don't know exactly how you're going to be able to uh, really highlight and achieve these plans. So this is where you're going to come in with this team. You're going to have your project director. You're going to have your lead grant writer. You're going to have your proposal project team, your external evaluator, whoever this may be. These are some of the folks who are going to be collaborating in this proposal. So not always, but sometimes you do have a requirement of a program evaluation. If you know that that's going to be the case, work on finding an evaluator prior to submission of the proposal, because chances are that evaluator will work alongside you, and they may even provide some in-kind services to help develop some of those metrics. And they'll help create that section on evaluation and create that section on goals and objectives. So finding one of those people early could be a benefit to you. And really, the term evaluator sometimes gets a negative connotation. At the end of the day, they're just helping you with your data collection and reporting on all the wonderful things that you're doing. Because if you're implementing your program with fidelity like you say you're going to, those metrics are going to be achieving themselves. So working with that evaluator as a team member, as a partner, is going to be impactful in the long run. So if you don't have this, and maybe it doesn't even require it, sometimes in grant proposals, you don't have a requirement of an evaluation. But if you have the ability to include that evaluation, you're going to be able to really show how it's going to be impactful. So a poor evaluation plan will disqualify a proposal. So if it doesn't require it and your plan is poor, you're automatically going to disqualify it. But if it doesn't require it and your plan is excellent, it's going to give that much more confidence to the funder. So this evaluation plan is going to help guide future programming and planning decisions. If I know that what we have just done at Fulton Elementary School, if I know that that is successful, I want to replicate that model at Grant Elementary School. And so I want to make sure that we're going to have a replicability and guide that future planning decisions. If I know that my program didn't work, my future plans are going to be dictated by my failures or not quite reaching that goal. So it gives you some internal accountability as well as providing that funder some accountability as well. Now, once you've won this grant, you're executing the grant, you're implementing that program, you're implementing that project, make sure that in your proposal and after it, you are staffing that project using those grant funds. Anytime you have the ability to fund your staff who are going to be running that program with grant funds, make sure you do that. You want to have dedicated people working with those projects. And that includes project directors or program directors, your communications personnel. If you have the ability to write into a grant, communications personnel, or maybe it's a data coordinator and that data person can work with creating some infographics or some data visualizations, it's going to really impact your future funding.
Quick question for you, Grant. So,
Yeah,
so
what's
to
up?
Grant's point, he just mentioned AfterSchool HQ is going to be a tool to help you with those customized reports on the just drop. But we do have Mr. White who just asked in the chat, would a grant objective and grant outcome be the same thing?
Yes. So and those I use more interchangeably, objectives and outcomes, because there's going to be talking about hard numbers, about maybe frequency of attendance or grades. Those ones, I know I've differentiated between goals and objectives, but objectives and outcomes oftentimes are going to be the same thing. Good question.
Thank you for sharing.
So with these project staff members, we're going to have the ability to not just communicate, but over communicate. We want everybody and their mother to know exactly what we are doing because it's going to do a couple things. If we are impacting kids the way we know we can, other folks are going to say, wow, I want to be a part of that. Or this is an organization that I know knows how to manage funds and impact kids. I want to donate some more funds to this organization. You can become that poster child. You can have that replicability for other organizations to say, I want to be more like this organization. And then the last thing, and this, I mean, it seems a little cheeky to say this, but we want to make it so difficult for that organization to not renew us with our funding that they're going to have to renew us. If we are the quote poster child for this type of program or this type of project, and that funder doesn't fund us again in the future, it may throw up some questions for that funder of why are you not funding this organization? They've been fantastic. Look at their metrics. We want to not just communicate, but over communicate. We want to make sure that everybody knows exactly the impact that we're making. If we just had 90% of our kids, 90% of our students who are regularly attending pass their state standardized test, brag about it. Let everybody know. Say, look at what these kids are achieving. Look at what these students have accomplished, where the school rate is a 63% pass rate, but students who attend this program are passing at a 90% rate. Let everybody know. We want to make sure we are over communicating success on social media, on flyers, on newsletters, on emails, on everything we do. We want to say, look how successful the students are who come through this program. And then the last thing I want to leave you here with, my buddy Buzz and Woody here, we want data everywhere. And it's easy for me to say that as an evaluator because I love data. I'm entrenched in data. I love spreadsheets. I'm working in spreadsheets all the time. I'm evaluating data on program effectiveness, but we want to be able to track data. And so if you have the ability to hire a data analyst or even just a data coordinator, someone who can be dedicated to that data piece is going to be huge when you're talking about your program. Create those graphic one page with those statistics on it. Make sure we are celebrating anything and everything with data. It's nice to tug on the heartstrings, and you need to do that because we're serving kids, we're serving people, we're serving our communities. And so we still want those pictures of the kid who got paint on his cheeks when he was painting that little project, or we want the kids who are doing the egg drop project and they're dropping it off a balcony and we see their smiles on their face. We need that. We want that. But back it up with data because two kids being happy is wonderful. But if we have 90% of our kids achieving some outcome, we want to make sure we include that as well. Track that data, put data everywhere because funders want data. They love data. And so as we're creating these programs, we're creating these grant proposals, we want that data. So again, my name is Grant Fulton. Throw up my email here. Would love to talk with you. I am going to give you a few minutes here shortly to ask any questions that you might have. I'm going to quit sharing the screen. If you don't have time to jot down my email, that's okay. I think Anna said she could email out these slides. So you'll have access to everything here. I appreciate you listening to me. I know grants are super boring. My wife tells me that all the time. So I think we might be talking about different grants though. But I'd love to hear questions. I'd love to hear feedback. Drop me an email, shoot me an email. Love to hear what your organization's up to and see how I can maybe help you out.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you everybody for taking some time to hop on. As you see, we do have Grant here for some additional questions. So while we have him here, please feel free to throw a question in the chat. Feel free to come off mute. We definitely want to give you all some time to really pick his brain a little bit as well, too.
Hi, Grant. I have a question.
Go
So
for it.
I wanted to know what is the best way for establishing relationships with funders? Is it a call? Is it a lunch? Or, I mean, I don't know. What's the best way to initiate the conversation with a new potential funder, I should say?
One of the things that I think works very well is sending personalized invitations to events that you're hosting. Maybe you're having a literacy night, maybe you're having a banquet, maybe you're having something like that, and you can have them be a distinguished or honored guest. kind of stroke their ego a little bit, which there's nothing wrong with that. It's playing the game. I mean, they're the ones with the money. We need to make sure that they're happy. So, I mean, have them be a distinguished guest, send them that personalized invitation, follow it up with a phone call. And if there's opportunities, I know some organizations will have community service opportunities. Get involved in supporting them somehow too, even if it's not financially. So volunteer at some of their fundraising events or volunteer at their community service day to demonstrate that reciprocity so that you can help them, they can help you, scratch each other's backs.
Awesome, awesome. Great insight there, Grant. The next question comes from Ms. Durham. And she asked, what is the best way to collect data? So just interested to get your perspective there as well.
Well, I know if we ask Marcus, he's going to tell you it's AfterSchool HQ, which is not a bad answer. I'm not going to tell you it's a bad answer. I like the guys at AHQ. They're wonderful folks. But even if you don't have a system like that, and you don't have that CRM, you don't have the ability to afford that right now, or maybe you have something else that you're working on. I've seen it any and every way done. I've seen it done where you're using Google Forms, and so every day you're doing documentation with there. If you can figure out how to create an MOU with a school district and have parents sign off for them to release data to you, because there are going to be FERPA requirements there. FERPA is the HIPAA of education world. And so figuring out how you can partner with school districts to collect that standardized test data, or it could even be surveys through surveying parents. And you're going to say, based on your perception, did your student, did your child improve on their attendance, improve on their behavior, improve on their grades? Even something as simple as sending out a survey through Google Forms or through Qualtrics or through MailChimp or you name it. There's a lot of different survey tools. That's a great way to collect that data. There's a little more synthesis if you do it that way, rather than having a platform to do some of that aggregation for you. But surveys are a real quick and easy way. Just be mindful. There have been some states recently, in my home state of Indiana, it's included, who have cracked down on how much you can survey students. And you do have to get parent permission for student surveys, not for parent surveys, but for student surveys. So just be mindful of that in navigating in your local setting.
Awesome insight, Grant. And yes, to Grant's point, I will briefly plug in AfterSchool HQ. I did drop a link directly in the chat where you can schedule some time with some of our team members to learn a little bit more about how we can help you streamline those processes. But great point, Grant. The next question we have is, can you apply for a grant if you're a LLC and not a nonprofit?
Can you? Yes. Are they harder to find? Yes. Because at the end of the day, LLCs are going to be for-profit entities, which means the person who would be receiving the grant or the organization that would be receiving the grant, part of that's going back to funding the founders, which doesn't exclude you from all grant opportunities, but there are a lot more for nonprofits and schools, universities, CBOs than there are for LLCs. So I don't want to say, Justin Bieber told me never say never, but I mean, it's just sometimes harder to find.
Definitely. Now, Anthony asked us, do you have any suggestions for grant management tool apps or software where receipt collection for accounting can be held?
One of the grant management softwares that I like, and it is a little pricey, I'll admit it, but I like to use it, is called Instrumental. And I don't get any kickback for referring you to this site. It's spelled instrumental, but at the end it's MENTL. So it's not instrumental AL at the end. But if you Google Instrumental, I think their largest package is maybe $500 a month, which I know is a little pricey. They got cheaper packages. I think their cheapest one's maybe like 170 a month, somewhere in that range. That's the one that I prefer to use because it does everything from grant seeking to award management to they have a built-in AI grant writing tool that after you've submitted about 3 to 5 grants, it'll start analyzing your writing and help you create new grant opportunities. So you're getting a lot of features within this one platform. And I'm not here trying to plug this platform, but that's just the one that I would recommend if I were going to do it and I had the resources to fund that.
Definitely. Thank you for that perspective. And then we have Don as we get ready to wrap up. She asked, if you're looking for a 15-passenger van, what is the best way to go about finding funding?
That one, oftentimes when you're looking at buildings, you're looking at vehicles, those are harder to fund. some of those capital projects or the vehicles. A lot of times funders like to see people being impacted. And so operations funds are sometimes more difficult. Um, with that being said, if there's a way to incorporate that into another grant and it's mandatory that you have a van or some means of transportation to transport kids, if it's mandatory to do that because of whatever circumstances the students are living in, you can include that. Off the top of my head, I don't have a whole list of grant opportunities specifically for vehicles or for capital projects, but there are a lot of different ones. You mentioned instrumental, but there's also Grant Station, there's Grant Watch, there's Grant Gopher. All of those are grant research tools. They have a little bit of a subscription fee. Instrumental is the one I like the best, but Grant Station, Grant Watch, Grant Gopher are all opportunities that you can type in your specific demographics, your region, your location, and your goals, and it'll start helping you sift through a lot of those different application opportunities and kind of be a search tool tailored to finding grant opportunities.
Awesome, awesome. So again, Grant, we thank you sincerely for everybody who is on. Again, you can find Grant's email directly in the chat. And for those who are looking to schedule some time, learn a little bit more about After School HQ, how we can be a resource helping you work toward these grants, please feel free to grab the link, schedule some time with us. But outside of that, one last question. So she said, Miss Durham was trying to get clarity on the names of the platforms you just mentioned. She said Grant Writing, Grant Station, and what was the last one?
It's so there's I think Grant Watch, Grant Station, and Grant Gopher, like the animal. If I said Grant Writing, I may have misspoke, but it's Grant Watch, Grant Station, Grant Gopher.
Perfect, perfect. Thank you again for the clarity. But again, as we get ready to close this out, Grant, we thank you sincerely. And everybody who joined us, thank you for your time. We hope you find this extremely valuable. We hope you have a great rest of your Friday Eve. We look forward to connecting with you again soon.